Welcome to the Bound to be Rich podcast, where I attempt to reverse engineer people who seem to be successful no matter the circumstances so that you can apply those lessons to your own life. I'm your host, Ismail Humet. In this episode, we are joined by Seye Omisore, the man behind one of the most successful software products in the photo booth industry, Pic Pic Social, an iPad-based social sharing program. He was profitable within the first month and built it to 7 figures in revenue in a niche industry without knowing how to code. He's now branched out into 2 more software products for photo booth business owners. We discuss why the software business is arguably the best business to be in, how he discovers ideas for new products, and how he builds them to millions in revenue without knowing how to code. Let's dive in. Shay, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for coming here.
Hey, man, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Ish.
I appreciate it. I know you. I've known you for years. I think you're most known for being the person behind probably one of the most successful software products in the photo booth industry ever. But before we get into that, I'd like to hear more about where were you before that? What were you doing before you got into that software product?
So before I got into Pic Pic Social, I was actually just running a photo booth company, a photo booth rental company like everybody else. And just with, and I guess even before that, right? What was I doing before that? I was trying to start a staffing agency actually, even before I got into, yeah. So initially I was trying to get into the staffing agency to do staffing for experiential, what's known as experiential marketing. And I started working initially with DJs because I was actually trying to build actually my first software platform to manage all the brand ambassadors that we were going to have nationwide, ideally. And I started just working with DJs on the local level, just hiring them out to schools and birthday parties and weddings, etc. And I was just kind of making, little profits off of sending them out to go do their events, but then I still had the hassle of, going and helping them set up equipment, etc. And actually, one of the schools asked about if we had a photo booth. And I don't even think I knew what a photo booth was, but I'm the type of person that never says no to anything. And that's always been a challenge of mine. So I went online, researched what a photo booth was, and I had, before I knew it, I had said yes to them. I looked at the prices and I was like, all right, if I can get 7 more of these high schools to say yes to this photo booth idea, I would have enough for the deposit. I'm sorry, I could take enough in deposits to go and build my first photo booth and buy all the equipment that I would need to by the time I was going to do the first event. So, that's kind of how I got my start, is trying to staff people at events, slowly turned into actually just staffing DJs initially. And then from there, from the DJ perspective or from the DJ staffing, just got into photo booths and just ran with it ever since.
So you mentioned even with the DJ staffing, like you were focused on making it into a software, right? Did you have a background in software? Did you know development? Where did that come from?
So it wasn't the DJ staffing portion of it, but it was the event staffing for brand ambassadorships. Like have you, all right, so you've been to like Costco or those big chains and they've got people hanging in there and they're giving you samples, right, of
Right,
things to
right.
eat. All right. So all of those people are basically brand ambassadors. And they're staffed from an agency. Let's say, so there's this company in California called Encore Nationwide. I used to do a lot of events for them. And they would basically just have staff nationwide that they would just send out. They'd send you an email. Hey, these are the job assignments that are available. And you kind of just choose what job it is that you want to go and apply for. And you work as a 1099 contractor. They give you the information and you go to the event and you go do whatever you got to do. And then you get paid within, let's say, 90 days. There were things in that process that I didn't like. So my goal was to basically, I wanted to rebuild what they had done and do it better. Um, So that was the initial software idea that I had.
But I guess what I'm trying to drill more into is like now everyone wants to build software, the SaaS software as a service model. Everyone thinks it makes a lot of sense. But back then, why were you so focused on like improving the software, building something better? Did you have a background in software? Did you like learn about the business model? Why were you so like pulled in that direction even from back then?
That's a good question. And I've never actually thought about it really until now. I just knew that I just knew that I wanted that was the type of business that I wanted to get into. So I didn't really understand the concept of SaaS. It wasn't until like maybe like 2 years into Pic Pic Social that I realized what a SaaS product was. But initially, it was really just an idea. And I didn't have like any formal training in technology or in computer science. When I was 14, 15 years old, how old are you ish? You're like 30 something.
Yeah, I'm there. I'm around there.
All right.
I'm in
So
my low 30s.
so do you remember you remember AOL?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna throw something out loud that I probably haven't said in like ages. Have you ever heard of punters from AOL?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so punters were these programs that you could create for AOL that they kind of messed with people like that were in the chat rooms, right? They were like basically they were bots. So I actually first started programming by learning how to build those punters way, 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 way back in the day. Um, I reached a point where I hit a plateau with the level of knowledge that I knew at that time, or the level of knowledge that I had at the time. There was no YouTube University, and there wasn't anybody around me who was a programmer that I could connect with to, I guess, break past that knowledge barrier that I had. And then I kind of was overwhelmed with computers at that time because I was like, because it was, if anybody had a computer issue, they would come to me. And it was just too much. And I was like, you know what? Screw computers. Like I just kind of gave it all up. And I actually went to college to be to be a psychologist. So I completely was going the full opposite spectrum of doing computers. It wasn't until when I got started with Pic Pic Social that I actually took a return to it. So no formal training to answer your question.
I mean, that's fascinating, though. So, first of all, my wife studied psychology too, which presents its own challenges with us. But you seem drawn to computers even at a young age. And like, not many people are sitting there building these. What is it, punter? I guess those are the things that kick people out of chat rooms.
Yeah, that's the part I didn't want to say. But yeah,
I'm guessing. I'm guessing from the name, but
yeah.
if you didn't have people around you that were into that, like, how did you get that seed planted in you so early?
I have no clue, man. Just spending way too much time on the internet, being at fourth and fifth grade, and seeing some people do some cool shit. And I'm like, how the hell are you guys doing that? And then just kind of being sent on the path of discovery. It was
Interesting. Yeah.
just a lot of self taught stuff at that time.
So on top of that, right, you have the tech leaning. For whatever reason, it's interesting to you. You want to build a software product. You still had the entrepreneurial mindset of like just doing whatever can make money. It sounds like because you saw the photo booth opportunity and you went in that direction as a rental company. That's very different from software. Were you just looking at that as a way to make money, or like why'd you chase that?
Yeah, ultimately it was just a way to make money, and it was like I said earlier, I was staffing out DJs, and what I was making off the top of the DJs wasn't really anything in comparison to when I realized how much money I could make staffing out renting out the photo booths. So all of a sudden, I could pay somebody, let's say $25 an hour to run the photo booth, and the photo booth was going for maybe $1,000, $2,000, whatever the heck it was at the time, and I'm making way more profit than I was doing the staffing out the DJs for the event. So we were staffing the DJs and the photographers, but again, it was just so much more of a headache. Whereas the photo booth was just simple and straightforward, and the profits were so much more.
Yeah, that's something that always kind of stood out to me. Is when I first came across photo booths, I was organizing like these little community events, and I'd hire out the band, I'd hire out entertainment. And I remember one time for a New Year's party, I hired out the band. I got like balloon artists and all these other things. And the most expensive thing was the photo booth. And I'm
Mm.
sitting there at the party, and I'm like, I paid, the band where they have to learn how to play an instrument their whole life, years and years of practice. And this guy just shows up with a box making more money than them without having to learn. Like, it's still a business. You still got to learn how to use the tools, but it's not like learning how to play a trombone for 15
Yeah.
years. So that it just
Yeah.
stood out to me as a easy way to increase like your revenue without learning a whole new expertise.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And I mean, I guess the challenges that, well, I mean, I definitely had a lot of challenges even within the photo booth portion of it. But when you get past the technical stuff, or I guess like the hardware technical stuff, and you get to the point where like you're like, okay, I can run this, but how can I actually make this look good, right? Especially when you've got professional photographers who are walking around and staring at you in your box and like, huh, what is this? What is this
Yeah.
thing? You want it to look good. You want the outputs to look good. So that was, I guess, the next plateau that I reached, which was, reaching out to my photographer friends and actually going online and learning about ISO and aperture and all of these things that I had no clue. I was the guy shooting on full auto. I mean, I still shoot on full auto if I have a DSLR, to be honest with you. But it was, understanding those things so that you can actually take better photos once you kind of reach that base level of competency with running the booth.
So I don't know if people really know that. I didn't know this, that you had your own rental company. Did that get really big? I assume that's where the idea for PicPic came from, but I'm curious, how did that rental company go? And then slowly, how did that transition into like finding the PicPic idea?
Yeah. Yeah, so the rental company was running for pretty full steam for us. I was operating it here in New England, and even at some points I actually started branching out into Florida, and I was doing, I would have gigs out there if they paid me enough. I would go to Florida and do gigs, and then sometimes I would kick it out to people that I had met who were in the local area in Florida. But ultimately, I just found that, well, to be honest with you, I just didn't like leaving the house to go make money. And I was just like, hey, listen, I can sit on my ass and make money and not have to leave. And I can travel at the same time. And I don't have to carry equipment. And I don't have to worry about staff. And, because that's a whole nother challenge when it comes to running a photo booth company. And when you're trying to expand, is now you're relying on other people even more so. And we were using college kids. I was using some of my cousins who I still have problems with from back then because they were just so extremely unreliable. But I just got to the position where I was like, you know what? I can make money while I'm at home. I don't necessarily need to leave and go do events. There's no reason why I shouldn't just fully concentrate on this. And that's when I kind of just slowly let the photo booth side of it go. I had a cousin who kind of stepped up and started her own company. So I helped her with that on the back end. But, the photo booth is probably 5-10% of income at this point. If I go to events, it's really just to test things out, or I'll go to other people's events if they're having really big events, if we really need to do like a full test or if we're rolling out anything new. But other than that, it's, all software.
Was that like a big risk for you? Because you have this thing that is a high profit margin, you make a lot of money with the rentals, and then you're just deciding to shift into software. Did you have some revenue in the software before you shifted completely, or did you just make the leap and figure it out? Like, was that a risk for you?
Um, no, it wasn't really a risk only because things were profitable at that point. To be honest with you, I was profitable the first month pretty much that I ran Pic Pic Social, and have, been profitable ever since. Never took any investment money. Been 100% bootstrapped. So within that first month, I knew that I was on the right path. It was really just a matter of fine tuning the software and kind of getting it to a certain level of where we needed it to be, and then ultimately transitioning, like I said earlier, maybe 2 years into it, into a SaaS model.
So you mentioned, all right, so you were a really early adopter of like the iPads as a tool in the photo booth world. Like, what made you have the rental company? What made you think, hey, we need a software for the iPad to do social sharing? How'd that come to you?
We had a lot of people who were asking us if PicPic Social could take photos, and at the time we had to say no because it didn't. But again, like always, it's really hard for me to say no to ideas, mainly just as challenges to myself. Hey, let me see if I can actually do this. So we did the first version. We made it work. And I mean, I think at this time, maybe Mark Anthony Mateo. I have no clue in the world where this guy is at this point, but he was probably the first. Well, he was probably the main proponent, at least in like the photo booth world specifically, that was pushing iPad photo booths. And I think we came in shortly after him. And again, that started taking off like hotcakes to the people who were really who really caught on to it. The rest of the industry kind of looked at it crazy, like a photo booth running on an iPad. Oh, I would never. And here we are today, and you can't go to a photo booth event without tripping over at least 10 of them.
You mentioned you were profitable in the first month. So I'm curious about that because a lot of people are afraid to get into software because it requires upfront money to develop it and you don't know yet if it's going to make money. How did you end up being profitable that quickly?
It was really just, I think I did a really good job at marketing it in that first month, to be honest with you. We got traction really quickly, but even leading into it, I had people beta testing it, trying it out, and I kind of built uh, a little tribe, right, of loyal users at the beginning, and that base of people ultimately, when it was released, kind of helped me spread the word. And so from those folks, and then compounded with how active I was with internet marketing at that time, really helped drive sales within that first month, so that it was profitable, and it just again just continued from there.
I read this blog post that you wrote. I don't know if you meant for this to be widely consumed, but I found it. And you mentioned in there that you had started 6-figure and 7-figure software products and had it on autopilot. And to me, as someone in the space, it sounds like a dream, like a 7-figure software business on autopilot. How do you get to that point? Um, I know there's a lot in there, but for example, profitable in the first month, you got to pay software developers to build the tool, to improve the tool. You have to market it. There's a lot involved, right? How do you get to a point where it's automated?
That's a good question, and you also have to define automated. So it's automated in the sense that I had my right hand man Matthew, who was kind of able to sit there and manage things for me, and I was able to be very hands off. But that was at a time where there wasn't anything crazy going on, right? The software was running. If we had issues, it was very minor issues that were sporadic, and things that we would be able to calmly silently deal with on the back end. There weren't any like huge fires that were happening, so I was able to kind of like sit back for 2 years, which is where I've kind of been, just hanging out until Corona hit. But yeah, it took a lot of hard work at the upfront, at the upfront, and that's the great thing about software and SaaS in general is once you do the work is done, and you can kind of, if you want to, you can sit back. I was kind of modeling the philosophy of the 4-day work week, so you can kind of sit back and just hire um, freelancers, right? There's only 2 full-time employees, and that's me and Matthew. Right now, everybody else is 1099 and freelance employers that we have from all over the world. So you can find people who are capable, more than capable of doing their job. It's tough. It's not easy. I lost a lot of money at the beginning trying to find good people that I could trust. But like anything in life, you've got to take the risk, and you've got to be able to work and put in the work to achieve the outcomes you're looking for.
This is something I still struggle with, honestly. Like I find myself so busy doing so many things. Like I definitely need to hire people to help me. But I look at things like, okay, this project isn't really making a lot of money, so it can't support hiring someone. This other project isn't making enough money to pay for someone. And I just tell myself that, hey, I got to keep grinding and hustling to make enough revenue to then hire someone, right? How do you think about that? What would your advice be? Like, do you hire someone before you can afford it? At what point do you start? Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of what I'm struggling with personally.
No, no, no. It makes 100% sense. And geez, how does that saying go? All right, do things that you can't do at scale, right? Um, Basically meaning like, all right, so there was a point in time where I would be the only person answering phone calls, and I'd have like a phone call from a user in China. So they're like 12 hours ahead. So it's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon for them. It's 2 a.m. in the morning for me, and I'm picking up the phone and answering their questions. So doing things that don't scale, meaning I could do that thing once in a while for that one customer, but that's not something that I'm able to do now, or that I would have been able to do if we had 300 or 500 or 1,000 customers at that time. So at the beginning, you've gotta do a lot of those things that don't make sense, like if you had a whole bunch of users. So I guess to answer your question, yeah, you've got to do the hard work up until the point where you can no longer do it yourself, and then it makes more sense to hire somebody else out to do that for you, because your time is more valuable at that point.
So I appreciate the honesty, because I've been trying to get input from people on this a lot lately. It sounds like the truth that no one likes to talk about is that you just have to grind yourself until you can afford hiring someone, right? Just keep working late hours like you were doing with the guy in China until you can afford it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the that's the not so glamorous part of owning a business, is all the hard work that you really need to put in. People, especially depending on how flashy you are, but they might see you with all of these nice things, but behind the scenes, you're really, or even not even behind the scenes, but previously, you were really busting your ass to get where it is that you needed to go. Even all while I was building Pic Pic Social, I wasn't really I wasn't spending that money on me, if that makes sense. All of that money was going right back into the business. So if you didn't know what I was doing, you would just think that I was working a regular 9 to 5 job, or you might even think that I was homeless the way that I left the house sometimes, because I would just go. I would leave the house fully scruffed. I've got a baldy, so if my baldy wasn't properly shaved at that time, and my beard was a little bit out of whack, you might be like, Shay, is everything doing okay, brother? Do you need $1? Can I get you something to eat? But on the back end, I've got this beast that I'm feeding on that I'm trying to fully fuel. But yeah, you've got to grind at the beginning.
That whole appearance is normal now with the quarantines. I mean, I'm sure everybody looks like that now. So,
Oh no, no, not me, baby. I'm GQ all day.
well, I see you now, man. You look fit. You're working out. You got a gym. I mean, you look
Oh
good.
man,
Everyone
yeah.
everyone else kind of fell back, and you're storming ahead. What happened there?
Listen, I'm ready for post pandemic, baby. I'm ready for the beaches.
I mean, all kidding aside, I find that to be common with successful people, right? While everybody else is kind of chilling, laying back, like whether it's a pandemic or usually the end of the year or the holidays, people start like coasting. The people who like are really successful, that's when they push, when everyone else is
Yeah.
chilling. So, um, yeah, I saw you getting jacked, working out in the gym. Good for you, man. I gotta, I gotta get up and
Thank
move.
you, man. Yeah, man. Don't let that dad bod take control of you. I'm not gonna lie. It definitely did. It definitely did for me. 3 kids. I finally got rid of my baby weight in the last 2 to 3 years. So
All right, so I got time.
we
I'm good.
good. Yeah.
So it sounded like for PicPic, you first got the idea from hearing it from your customers, where they're saying, "Hey, we want to share this. We want to be able to do this." Right. So you got it from the customers. How was when you first decided to build it? Did you build it for yourself to sell to your rental company, or did you find a first customer first before you invested in it? How'd you go about like those first few clients for PicPic? How'd you get them?
We had people who are constantly hitting us up, asking us again specifically if it could take photos. And I actually remember a conversation with a okay. So around the time when PicPic was kind of coasting, right? I was looking at other business ideas. And one of the ideas that I got from a good friend of mine who worked in the car industry was to create what's called the digital dealer jacket. The dealer jacket is what it is that you put together when you're finalizing all your papers to buy your car. Everything is still done on paper, right? They give you all this paperwork, you've got to sign it, and long story short, a lot of that stuff gets lost in the shuffle. But by the time you leave and come back, and it just creates a lot of customer experience issues. So we were working with a car dealership to create a digital version of this dealer jacket. And at that time, I had a prototype of a Pixity booth, right, which was our iPad photo booth software. And they saw it and they wanted to buy the software for a bunch of they wanted to buy the software and some kiosks for a bunch of their locations. So we ended up doing that. And then around the same time, we had some agencies. Geez, what country? I think it was an agency from Brazil, as a matter of fact, and they were coming down to do brand some type of experiential marketing to promote travel to Brazil. They were going to do it in Grand Central Station in New York. So, and all they wanted were iPads loaded with the software. And I was like, what in the world? Like, I'm about to send you 4 iPads, right? And some software, and you're going to give me how much? That's when I was like, okay, we're onto something here. And although the photo booth industry is looking at it crazy, these agencies get it.
You kind of were fortunate to be in a position where you saw people that wanted it before everyone else realized that people would want it, and then you kind of just went after it. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay, so one other thing that I thought was interesting is that you had PicPic, huge success, and then you started going into other products that are related, like Paddee, Virtual Booth, etc. How do you think about like branching off into other products versus whether like how do you know you're not chasing trends? I guess when you're building these other things.
So with Pixity, it definitely wasn't a trend, obviously, because there wasn't anything that was established there. Um, and I guess kind of staying specifically photo booth related, Paddee was just always like a passion project of mine. Again, I come from the school of thought that no idea is original, right? There's always an idea that you can take from another industry and you can apply it. You can apply it in a new way to the industry that you're currently in. So if anybody's heard of Canva before, they know exactly what Paddee is. And, obviously I saw a marketplace that was nothing but Photoshop files, and kind of already with as much as I dealt with our customers, and you've got highly technical customers who can do anything that it is that they need software wise, and then you've got customers who are not so technical that need a little bit more help with things. So I just saw a huge market of folks who needed help in that capacity with their photo booth templates. That I was like, okay, let's take the concept of Canva and apply it directly to photo booth templates. And that's where the idea for Paddee came about. But to be honest with you, Paddee was like a big stressor for me for like the first year, maybe year and a half. I expected it to take on the type of life that PicPic did, meaning the first couple months I'd be profitable. It took Paddee almost a year before it became profitable. And even before I released Paddee, I kid you not, I probably talked to over 100 people who said, yes, when Paddee is ready, I will sign up. When Paddee was ready, I could not find those 100 people. And I was like, what the hell have I done?
So why was that? Why was it? That's interesting.
That's a great question, and I mean, I've read a lot of different books about customer development and product development, and ultimately, people might tell you things just because they're trying to be nice, or I can't really say, to be honest with you, but ultimately, I'll say that for those particular customers that we were talking to, it wasn't the right product market fit. I think that that's one piece of it. Okay, but I'll also say that I think the bigger issue with it at that time is that we didn't have a huge enough template of a big enough template library, and it wasn't really until after a year, because so we had Paddee done, but for the platform itself to be done is one thing, but then to have a template library is a completely other beast. So spending that year kind of loading it up with templates, and then people starting to slowly see what's possible with it and how efficient it can make their life, that's when it kind of started to reach a point of, I guess what you would call critical mass, and people started to gravitate towards it. And it's one of those things that we've never really put marketing dollars behind, but the people who know it, like, they love it, and it kind of really runs on without too much fuss right now.
Yeah, I know people who use it and love it, and I'm curious. Like you talked about how difficult it was to get going. When you first come up with the idea, you said it's a passion project. Is it just you seeing Canva and thinking, "Hey, we can do this here"? Is it you hearing from people complaining about something? Do you first try to like pre-sell people and show them mock-ups? How is that very early iteration process for you when you have an idea?
It's a combination of things. And you can go through all of those things, but ultimately you don't really know you've hit something until somebody's willing to put money up. So when we first launched Paddee, I was doing Paddee actually with all right. So I actually tried to launch Paddee twice with two different partners. The first partner didn't end up going through with, but we parted amicably. The second partner, we tried to launch it, and I wasn't as concerned like if it was going to be a flop or not, because the financial responsibility was shared between me and somebody else. But then it didn't. Things weren't going the way that the partnership should have been going, in a perfect world. So we had to go separate ways, and in going separate ways, I basically bought out that person's shares. Um, so in doing that, now all of the financial responsibility was on me. So like it was pretty stressful, and it was like, okay, like, let's see what happens here. This is no longer like me losing 50% of the startup cost for this. It's 100%. So it's, we've got to find a way to make this work.
Have you heard of this guy called Dane Maxwell?
I have not. Tell me about him.
Okay. I basically, he was one of the, he's not very famous, except for like in SaaS podcast world, but he was one of the guys that really inspired me to create a software product because, and his whole spiel is like, you have to find a pain point. You have to talk to people and find out what is their pain so you can sell it to them. And he like really advocates for pre-selling a product before you hire a developer. So I was like, all right, let me try this out. And that's how I started my first software product, where I threw a Word document together. And I was like, you know what? If anyone will pay me, if I could get 3 people to pay me for a year's subscription based on a Word document, I'm going to build the software. And I was shocked that it worked. And I feel like that was my personal big eye opening experience getting into software, because I was like, wow, people want it so bad, they'll pay for it before it's built. And like there was no
Yeah,
sneakiness about it. It was totally upfront. Like, I want to build this. It's not built yet. Here's what it's going to look like. Would you pay for it? If so, give me
yeah,
money. Because like you said, everyone says whatever they want to say, but when the time comes to put the money up, that's when you really find out if people are buyers.
yeah, yeah. So with and what was his name? Dane Maxwell.
Dave Maxwell, yeah.
Yeah, so I've heard that school of thought, right? And that's basically, launch with an MVP. And I started when I was building Pic Pic Social. I launched with the book, um, the startup. Well, geez, what's the name of it? But it's I think it's by Eric Ries. But
Yeah,
it's
the lean startup.
yeah, the Lean Startup. So I started with that as a framework, and then when I started building Paddee, I was building with the mindset of Eric Thiel. Have you ever heard of him?
I don't think so,
No,
no.
Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel. I
Peter
think his
Thiel,
name's
yeah,
Peter
yeah.
Thiel.
Zero to one.
Yeah, 0 to 1. Yeah, so that was like my Bible at the time. And that, Peter Thiel basically said, build something that's 10 times better than whatever is out there for that particular niche. So in his instance, or in his philosophy, he's like, don't pre-sell it, just build what it is that that particular niche is going to need, and then just go and like just be 10 times better than whatever is out there. So for us, right, we know that we're not going after people who are Photoshop users. We're not going to build anything that's 10 times better than that. But for those folks who don't like Photoshop and are struggling with photable templates, we're already winning in that 10 times better than arena. So that was the philosophy that we took when we started that.
So that's interesting because he's like, I've read that book too, where he talks about you want to be a monopoly in the beginning, right? Just build
Yeah.
something quietly, be the best at it, and have a monopoly. But I feel like,
Yep.
and this is for any industry, not just like the photo booth software world, but I feel like whenever you're succeeding and you're growing quick, it's inevitable that eventually you're going to have competitors kind of creeping in and taking market share. What'd you learn from that experience of like losing ground to competitor? Because I feel like this happens to everybody, myself included. Like, what do you learn from it in case other people listening encounter that and they don't know how to handle it?
I mean, how do you? I mean, you've just got to take it. You've just got to take it as it comes. For me, specifically, when it comes to Pixie Booth, I just had a lot of personal stuff going on around that time. So that's when I started kind of mentally checking out from the photo booth industry, just because I couldn't put as much effort into it. So, and I guess that's kind of and I guess the other piece of it too, I guess, is if so again, we're self funded. From what I understand, I'd probably venture to say I think the other three big players, three big software companies in our industry are like they have they have some type of capital behind them, but I could be completely wrong. But ultimately, if you're in a position to get funding, it's not a bad idea to take funding. And it wasn't until let's say pandemic when the pandemic hit that I started looking at other projects outside of the photo booth industry, and I started pitching to investors, and I started seeing how much money I could get, and I was like, holy shit! Like I can, I like although I could start this company right now with my own cash. The fact that I've now got a few $100,000 that I could run off with, I can get this MVP off so much quicker.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you said that. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I feel like I've thought about this a lot where I've seen the same thing. There's people out there that want to invest capital. They have a ton of money. They don't know what to do with it. And they'll happily give it to someone to build a software product, right? But you talked about this earlier when you talked about Paddee, where you said because you had a partner and it wasn't all financially on you, maybe you had less of a fire to make sure it worked. Not like on purpose, but I feel like when it's all on you, it's just a different level of pressure that you have to make it work. So, do you think about that when you're trying to build something new? Would you rather build it with your own cash? Would you rather take people's money, or do you think that would make you less motivated? I guess.
It would definitely still keep me just as motivated because if anything, you'd probably more motivated when there's other people's money on the line, or at least for me, I think there would be more motivation because if I'm taking your money now, right, I know that whatever you're giving me is probably just a small fraction of whatever you probably really have. So if I can take whatever cash you're giving me now, and I can go in and I can prove this concept that we've discussed, and then you've made your money back plus some, I know the next time I have another idea that you're going to come probably with the same amount of money times two, and you might bring a couple people with you. So I'm more motivated from that perspective. So yeah, I can't say that my level of motivation ever really changes. But just in terms of investors, I've just never really liked the idea of having and somebody else over my back and kind of wondering, what's going on and, what are we going to do next? And I just never really wanted to do all of that. So that's why I always enjoyed, having Pic Pic Social as a private company with no funders. I've had multiple people approach me either to buy Pic Pic Social. We've had people within the industry approach us to buy Pic Pic Social. And never needed to do it. It was something that we could still maintain, operate, and grow without any help.
So why would you not sell it? Because I know some people. I know people that have sold it. How do you think about that? Like, why is it worth selling versus not worth selling?
So the money's got to be right. Um, so yeah, the money's got to be right, and I don't have any immediate needs to take that money and go do something else that I can't do already with what we're generating, if that makes sense. Um, and then also on top of that, there's just so much more that could be done with it. If that makes any sense. I mean, there's always like there's always like a new level that you can take things. There's so many untapped ideas and untapped markets within the photo booth industry that haven't been touched. And then you've got new things like virtual photo booths that kind of came about out of nowhere that can, propel you in different ways.
Yeah. I want to dive into all the stuff that you can do that's more. But before I just leave this topic, I'm curious.
Hmm.
You said it's so much easier to raise money from investors now. I imagine it's because you already have a big success, right? So for people starting, they may have to make something work on their own first, grind, hustle, and then once you have that first big win, I imagine it's a lot easier. Or do you think you would be able to get funding now, even if it was your first project?
No, well, let me not say no. I've never tried previously, so I can't necessarily say, but I'm sure it would be significantly harder. It would be easier, let's say, from the perspective of me approaching friends and family, right? Because they've always known my work ethic, rather. But the fact that I've got two successful software projects, that it just makes it easier, right? It's less of a conversation. And as a matter of fact, the project that I was trying to jump off around when the pandemic hit, the type of equity that I was giving up was it was some people were insulted with my term sheet when they saw the term sheet, but I was completely okay with giving them that term sheet, knowing what it is that I was about to build, and knowing that just having full confidence that, okay, if you give me the money, cool, but if you don't, I still have funding by myself that I can launch this off. So I wasn't in a position where I was giving up 20% equity right off the bat. I knew going into it I didn't want to give up more than 5% equity. So, and it's okay, do you want to be a part of this? And if you do, sure, great, let's go. And if you don't, it's fine. There's no hard feelings, but I guess just don't go into it desperate, I think is the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, I think that confidence comes from having some success, like not needing money. You could do it on your own,
Yeah.
and then you get to that level where you're that confident. But it sounds like all right. So you've built these tools; they're doing very well. You're doing very well, and then like everybody else, the pandemic hit. The event industry is like shut down. Everyone's struggling. No one's spending money. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really, really not like it was a year ago. And you were already kind of checked out. What made you say, hey, you know what? Now I see opportunity. Now I'm going to come back, double down, expand it, and build a virtual booth software. Even though still, like today, a lot of people don't believe in it. I do, but I know a lot of people still are skeptical about it. What made you say, hey, that's it, pandemic or not, event industry's dead. I'm coming back and I'm building this out?
Well, so even pre-pandemic, I already had my fire back. And I was actually, I was coming back in with a different angle around when the pandemic hit, about how we were going to approach things with Pic Pic Social. The pandemic basically had us put all of that on hold so that we could figure out what to do with the software and how to stabilize. So for us, right, we probably got hit the hardest out of any software company because we're primarily a sharing station. So with the other softwares, people can still do events, they can still do drop-offs, but in a situation like Corona, you want to have as few things to bring to an event as possible that have touch points. So there's not really a real need for a software like PicPic Social in that instance. So for us, it was really about, okay, what can we do to pivot that makes sense? And that's why initially we were looking outside of the photo booth industry, and it was just a matter of, okay, I had the idea for the virtual booth in my head for a little bit, and I was just trying to see how much sense it would make, and if people would people be able to actually sell it and get events. So we started, sending it out to some of our closer customers that we had a more ongoing, I guess, a continued relationship with, or that I talk to more often than not, and just kind of getting their feedback. And they were like, absolutely, we can sell this. This is something that we can start to pitch, and we had some of them start to pitch it to their customers, and we're starting to get bookings immediately, right off of the bat with it. So we decided to, go all the way in, and as I just kind of looked at the landscape and just kind of saw where virtual booths could go, I just saw, okay, all of this tremendous opportunity for anybody in the industry who was willing to embrace the new technology. And again, just looking at it the same way that we did with the iPad photo booths, that this is something that people are going to look at like it's crazy, but they said the same thing when people had iPad photo booths. Like, oh, this is wild. Why would anybody want to do this? And, all of the same conversations that people are having now about virtual photo booths are the exact same conversations that people had 7 years ago, 6 years ago, however long it was, when iPad photo booths started coming on the scene. It's the exact same conversation.
Is that frustrating for you because you see the potential, you're telling people about it, this is a way for them to make money when they need it most, and people just don't believe it, don't see it, don't want to hear it? Is that frustrating, or do you get more motivated to keep pushing it?
Oh yeah, absolutely not more. Absolutely not frustrating at all. If anything, I just laugh because I just feel like I got a free ride on a um on a time travel machine, and I already know how it's going to end up. So you know,
So that's a lot of confidence. Like, why are you that confident? Like, for people who are skeptical about virtual and they're hearing this, like, where does that much confidence come from?
oh man, okay, you're gonna make me show my underwear in public. I've never been wrong, ish, to be honest with you.
The truth comes out.
Ish, I've never been wrong. To be honest with you, so I'm just, every time I swing, I hit. So I know, and if you just look at this from, all right, so you've got to look at it from a different perspective, and I think a lot of people in the industry don't can't see it from that perspective. Um, you can't look at it as a photo booth. You have to completely step away from there. So even before I got into the photo booth industry, I was working as a digital marketer. So I look at virtual photo booths, I've always even looked at photo booths in general as a digital marketing tool. So that's really where the power in virtual photo booths lie. And anybody who's in the industry who's really doing big events, they're not photo booth companies. They're marketing companies. They're marketing partners. They work as a partner for those agencies that they work with. So if your mind is still looking at your photo booth as a photo booth, and that you're not doing digital marketing, it's not until you can shift your mindset to that virtual photo booths start to make sense, and you start to see the omnipresent nature of virtual photo booths and having QR codes on pizza boxes that somebody can scan and take a photo, and you're able to capture the company's able to capture the email address of that person, and then that person is then sharing to social media, and you're helping promote that company online. It's not until you start to look at yourself as a digital marketer and you start to see how a virtual photo booth can help local businesses grow and market themselves, or how you can help brands market themselves on a global platform, that you'll truly see the value of it. So yeah, it's cool that people are doing these these online virtual events, right? And there are people making big bucks from it. But truly, from a digital marketing perspective, I think that that's really where people will be able to get into virtual photo booths and jump into making recurring revenue. And virtual photo booths ultimately replacing the permanent install that we've
Oh yeah,
all known and loved.
I think that's a huge opportunity area personally, because it's hard to pitch people on permanent. And for people listening who don't know the photo booth world, it's like salons. They pay to have an actual photo booth in their store for people to take before after pictures or whatever to promote the store. Um, I think that it's hard to sell them because it's very expensive. But if you have a virtual offering that's a lot cheaper and it's recurring revenue, to me that's a home run. So it's just frustrating a little bit. I know you said you laughed at them, but like there's a huge opportunity here and people don't see it. And I interviewed people that were doing very well with virtual, and I think the way you explained it right now is perfect because uh, everyone's skeptical while they think about it as a photo booth, right? But it's really much more than that. It's a marketing tool, and when you start to see it being used that way, your mind opens up to other ways that it can be used as a marketing tool. And that's why people often say to me, "Hey, what about when in person comes back? Who's going to use virtual then?" Maybe the confusion is virtual photo booth, the name photo booth. Maybe there's a better name for it, but even if in-person comes back, the things that you just talked about, the pizza box, the permanent install, marketing online is not going away. If anything, there's more and more photo marketing online, social media online. Like, that's not going away. It's only growing. I don't know if you agree, Shay. Sorry, I ranted a
No,
little bit there.
yeah, no worries, no worries. No, I 100% agree, and I guess this is kind of where my pitch comes in for the day. Um, but so as a part of what I see, all right, so I see a big knowledge gap, right, between the folks who are going to be able to have huge success with virtual photo booths and the people who are not. And the people who are going to be able to have success with it, they understand it from a digital marketing perspective, and they're able to do all of those things that come along with digital marketing, email marketing, social media marketing, content marketing, etc. So part of what we're launching in the next couple of weeks is what we call the Virtual Booth Academy. And our goal, right, is for it to be an accelerator program where we can give people the competency level in digital marketing so that they are able to run and launch a virtual photo booth business that generates them recurring revenue. And it's something that, again, they'll be able to bolt on as a part of their existing photo booth business, or it's something that they can do completely separate as a completely new entity that offers a virtual photo booth as a marketing tool. So you can actually go to virtualboothacademy.com to learn a little bit more.
Awesome. And I'll put the link in the show notes, everybody, too. And I think this is also something that separates you, Shay, from everybody else is that, you know, there's other software companies pushing their virtual product, but I don't see anyone really teaching how to sell it, how to use it, how to pitch. Like, that to me is the biggest hang up that I see, is that people, they either don't get it, like you said, there's a knowledge gap, or they see it and they're like, yeah, but no one's buying, and they don't know how to position it. So I think that's the most valuable education right now that there possibly could be in our industry. So I definitely urge people to check that out. I'll put the link in the show notes, and I think that would be a really helpful resource. So I'm not, like, I've done I took some programming classes in high school, right? But I'm not a programmer. I just know some very basic stuff. It sounds like you were never trained as a developer either, even though you played around with it as a kid with the chat rooms. What do you tell people that dream of building a business, like a software business? It's scalable. You can make money from anywhere in the world, but they don't know how to code. What's your advice for them?
My advice for them, and you don't know how to code. so, that's actually funny, right? So part of, I guess, what you can say, my personal mission for myself, right, is to build my personal brand. And the reason behind that is, at some point in time, I would like to teach people how they can start their own software company with no knowledge of how to program. So my simple advice, right, is to try it. But yeah, it's a very high chance you're going to lose your money, right, as you get into it. But try to find a mentor, try to find a coach, try to find somebody who's done it. And that might be a hard feat, but feel free to reach out to me in whatever capacity. But try it. If you've got an idea, um you know outline like a skeleton of what are the must-have features, right? What does this product absolutely need to have before it can launch? And then try to find a developer. You can go to Upwork.com. I think Freelancer.com is another website, and don't give that developer all of the bells and whistles and all of the shiny cool things that project or that app needs to have, but give them like a very small task, and you just give them very small task by very small task, and allow them to build out the project and show you. But ultimately, like any business that you want to do, or like anything that you want to do in life, the only way that you learn is by doing. So there's only so much reading that you can do. There's only so much talking that you can do. At the end of the day, the rubber needs to meet the road, and you've got to start running.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like coding, developing, it's not that it's a commodity, but like you said, you can just hire people, pretty easily. It's a whole other thing to find good people and test them and give them like stepping stones, like you just alluded to. But I actually had a story where one of my business mentors, a very successful guy, um, we had someone else that we knew that was a programmer, and this kid was like, to me, he was like a rock star. He's building this, building that, making money, and all this stuff. And I remember I went to my mentor, and I'm like, man, I wish I knew how to code. Like, I need to learn how to code because that's where the future is. And I'll never forget this because the mentor looked at me and said he'd rather be like me because a coder is just like, I don't want to diminish it because it's still important, but they're a worker. The more important thing is that business mindset. Like Shay was talking about, you find opportunities, you find things that need to be built, you market it, you put the pieces together, you hire someone, you manage them, you build the business. And I feel like a lot of times we get distracted by, hey, I should learn how to code. Maybe you should learn how to build a business and hire people to do the coding for you. That's how I look at it. But again, my personal biggest problem, Shay, is like I told you before, and I appreciate your advice. When do you start hiring people? When do you get more and more people if you don't have the revenue yet to support them? So my homework is to build the revenue up so I can hire more people. It sounds like.
Yeah. Have you heard of this book called the E-Myth?
Yep. I've recommended that book too. That's a classic.
Yeah, and when I read that book, I saw all of the mistakes that I had made in previous businesses of trying to do everything yourself and not knowing when you're at the point where it is that you need to let go and hire out to other people. So very very important to, but you've acknowledged that already, and I think as entrepreneurs we don't, and you end up creating nothing but more than a job for yourself. And we're not here to create a job for ourselves. We want to create businesses that we can step back from and actually enjoy our life.
And if you're starting something where you're going to be talking more about this stuff, I'm in. I'd love to listen. Maybe I'd bring you back on to promote it. But that sounds to me like a great direction for you to go into. You mentioned and I was going to ask you about the personal brand, and I'm glad you talked about it because I saw that in the blog post. I also saw you talk about a Mastermind group. Can you tell me like why that's important? Why should people try to create a group of people around them to talk this stuff about?
Ultimately, it's a way for you to hold yourself accountable, and especially if you're all learning the same thing. Like, so my Mastermind group, we're all on the same kind of personal mission right now. So we're all working our personal branding, but then also learning the same things within our business that we're applying to our businesses at the same time. So it allows us to bounce ideas off of each other, and it's things that like we all get because we've read, let's say, the same book, we've watched the same video, or we've gone through the same course. So we're applying the same knowledge, the same skills that we've just learned, as opposed to talking to somebody else who's not in business, or they're in business but their mind is completely somewhere else. Having that mastermind group allows you to have people who are connected to you in one capacity, who are holding you accountable, and who also have the same level of knowledge or a little bit more, but can help push you and move you forward with whatever your tasks are. Super important.
So before I get into the last couple questions that I ask everybody, I saw on top of everything that you're doing, you also got into real estate. I saw you bought a piece of land and you're building it. How did you get into real estate? Why'd you get into real estate? Are you like looking to deploy cash flow and build recurring income? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, so that was part of me looking uh, outside of the photo booth industry. So that was the second property that I was working on. Actually this was the first one that I was constructing from the ground up. It's still actually in process right now. But there's you don't keep all your eggs in one basket. So for me, a lot of the time, or for the majority of the time, all of my eggs were within the photo booth industry. So it was like, okay, I was just looking at other places outside of the photo booth industry that I could invest in. When you're a business owner, right, you've got the option of putting your money into a 401k. You can buy stocks. You can buy all of these different vehicles to fund your retirement. So for me, I've always looked at real estate as a way to fund my retirement. And ideally, I want to be in a position where I'm not paying my own rent. So to have a series of multifamily houses, apartment complexes that are all paying for themselves, and then ultimately pay for me to sustain and live. So that's where the real estate stuff comes from.
Do you have any advice for people looking for properties that say, hey, I can't find them, it's too competitive?
Man, if that's all you're gonna say, you're never gonna be able to do shit in life. Um, I, I, I,
So
I,
true.
I kid you not. I probably knocked on. So I knocked on maybe no. I sent out maybe 110 letters before I found a piece of land that I was able to buy. And that piece of land that I bought for 70 grand is probably worth almost 150,000 right now, especially because of the way that, housing prices are skyrocketing. But
That's after
ultimately,
you built it, or just the land is still just worth 70 grand?
that that's no. The land itself is probably worth like 150
Wow.
right now. That's with no development on it. But I say that to say, so one of the big things that people always say is, "Oh, is this a good time to buy property?" Right? There's never a best time. It's, do the numbers make sense for you? So you've got to learn how to analyze the numbers and see if the numbers make sense. Because I don't know if you know anything about, or it's like jump roping, right? If somebody's jump roping, you can't always try to time it. You got to time it for whatever is. I'm sorry, you got to time it for how it works for you as things are going. You can't just wait for the perfect time. Otherwise, you're always going to miss it.
Yeah, that's great advice. So, looking at this whole conversation, I'm curious, and we kind of got a taste of this with you. I think you said you were 14 or something, tinkering with coding. But if I interviewed people around you when you were a kid, right? What would they describe you as? Would they say like, "Oh, Seye, I knew he was going to be successful"? Like, were there signs back then of someone that would be a successful entrepreneur in the future?
Yeah, I mean, let me see. I was always selling something as a kid. I remember at one point I couldn't. There was like this area that we couldn't drive off to, or we couldn't ride off to. It was like all the way on the other side of the city. So none of the little kids, right? And when I say little kids, I mean like 12, 13, 14. Like our parents would beat the hell out of us if we went that far outside of the city. But me being me, I took my bike and I went anyway. And I went because I knew that's where the guy who was selling firecrackers was. So I would go to him, I'd buy a pack of salutes for 25 cents, and I'd come back and sell them to everybody on my block for $1. So I say that to say I've always had little businesses as I was young, and not really, I guess, knowing that it was driving an entrepreneur in me. But my dad has been an entrepreneur, and that's where I got the idea of, hey, I want to start this staffing agency from. Like, he used to staff, yeah, he used to run a staffing agency. My mom used to run and operate stores. I've got my cousins who I work with now that are part of my mastermind, that I've always looked up to, who have run businesses within the music industry. So I mean, I've got a whole tribe of entrepreneurs around me. So I guess they wouldn't be so surprised, since everybody around me are entrepreneurs.
Did you feel different from your friends? Like if you had that kind of mindset at a young age, were you different than everybody, or did you have no problem fitting in?
I felt different from the perspective of I was always like, all right, I'm gonna end up having to give these guys jobs because they're all bullshitting, and I don't know what's gonna end up happening with them. I I
I,
kid you
I
not.
I love hearing these stories, and that's the whole motivation for the podcast. I feel like there's a lot of people that feel that way, like they're bound to be successful, they're bound to be rich, and usually, if you talk to people who are successful, they all have those kinds of stories where they were doing weird things even at a young age, right? So, I think you just keep going, you keep grinding, you keep trying, and eventually, one day, you'll have your pick or whatever it is for you in the future. Um, but my final question that I ask everybody, Shay, is like we touched on a lot of different things. Even when you talked about seven-figure software business, being on autopilot, checking out, mastermind, everything. What is a rich life to you? Because clearly we all know money isn't everything, right? There's other things that motivate us, that fuel us. And I know you were talking about this on a Clubhouse conversation recently. Like, what is your why? So, what's a rich life to you?
Yeah. So I used to always say, I want to be rich. I want to be rich. I want to be rich. And I would kind of just say that, not really knowing or understanding what I meant by it, and just thinking that it was, the dollar amount, right? I want this certain number of, dollars in my bank. Or for me, it started, when I saw my dad's W-2 one day, and I saw that he made six figures, and I was like, all right, so this, for me, this is my benchmark. This is my benchmark. When I made this, I made it as a man in life, and I can sit back and chill. But when you kind of get there and you realize that, okay, and this is so cliche, right? Like you hear it all the time, but you're like, okay, that this isn't really bringing you the type of happiness that you thought it would bring you. Like it definitely does make things a whole lot easier in certain aspects. But when I sat back and just thought of, all right, like Shay, you always say you want to be rich, but what does that really mean? I found that it's not that I really want to be rich. It's more so that I want to be free, right? And free meaning I don't want to have to wake up every day and go work for somebody else and be on their time. And I want to be able to travel when I want to be able to travel. Like I just want to be able to move completely unencumbered in this world. Um, it just so happens that money is needed in order to do that. So my idea of being rich is just being able to live a free life, to be able to experience all of the things that life has got to offer, but to also show the people around me all of these things and to allow them to live life on their own terms in the same way.
I think that's a great place to leave it, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your wisdom. And I hope everybody checks out the Virtual Booth Academy and whatever other projects you got coming up. If you're talking more about this, I would definitely be a listener. I think you're someone really good to learn from about this stuff for sure.
Thank you, Ish. And I'm definitely enjoying your podcast and everything that you've got going on as well. So we will absolutely connect, and I'll be watching everything that you're doing as well.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon. And there you have it. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to leave a review. I may even give you a shout out and read yours out on the show. For any and all resources that we discussed, check out the show notes or head on over to boundtoberish.com. Until next time.